Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Vina, host of the SmartTechCheck podcast. Today's Thursday, December 5th, 2024. The Matter Smart Home Initiative, driven by the Connectivity Standards Alliance, is a universal protocol designed to ensure seamless interoperability among smart home devices from various brands and ecosystems. By creating a single open standard, Matter eliminates compatibility issues across platforms like Apple HomeKit, Google Home, and Amazon Alexa, making it easier for consumers to build integrated smart home setups. This initiative is crucial for accelerating smart home adoption, fostering innovation, and is simplifying development for manufacturers while providing a more reliable and consistent experience for users. Joining me today for a candid discussion on how Matter is progressing in the marketplace is Tobin Richardson, President and CEO of the Connectivity Standards Alliance. Tobin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Mark. Great to be here with you.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming. As I was mentioning before I hit the record button. I really do start. I've always been a believer in what you guys are trying to accomplish, but when you walk into Costco, which I did last weekend, and you see the Matter logo on a 90-inch LG, I think it was 98 inches, at an unbelievable price, by the way. LG TV, and LG is obviously a major player in the TV space. You're making traction.
It's pretty exciting to see that. I've always been excited to see the logos. We had when Zigbee first showed up on an Echo hub, seeing that on the bottom was great to see. Open standards taking hold, and now with Matter, it's just really exciting. And Matter on that LG, and I'll let the guys know. They'll be happy to hear that you saw that. I happen to have a couple of TVs that might be one of them, but it's great to see that, and that is really a great mark that both the manufacturers have confidence in what they're putting their effort into, but they're comfortable putting that in front of consumers. So it's really good to see.
Well, let's do this before I have some questions for you. I'm going to show some slides, but what I like to do for people who are appearing on my podcast for the first time is to talk about themselves. So Tobin, just very quickly, let's talk about your background.
Yeah, happy to. So I've spent the better part of a decade in this role with the Alliance, trying to help kind of mirror along its growth in turning from a single technology on Zigbee and taking the great lessons from Zigbee and what that's brought into the market, continue to grow Zigbee, but really bring that to the lion's share of what is smart home with Matter paired with other sister technologies. And so that's been my mission, my passion the last 10 years. Before that, I've spent about 20 years in basically trying to help technology work in every venue and place I've worked, and also looking at that in two ways. One, in terms of kind of structurally, how can technology improve processes? But also, most importantly, how can it improve the experience of the people that are interacting? That's and with the Alliance, that's really about, and you hit it in your intro. It is about enabling consumers to have great experiences. So I've had really a passion around, let's say, kind of consumer-centric, user-based stuff working, and I've had the privilege. It's really been a privilege to work in some crazy places. I've worked for governors of California. I've worked on multi-billion-dollar projects with the U.S. federal government, international programs, and most recently, before I jumped in with the Alliance, I was with Pacific Gas and Electric Company as part of their first smart meter rollout back in the early 2000s, looking to really empower consumers to have more control over their energy usage. And I'll use that as a segue to say everything is new again, coming full circle. Energy management is one of the newer areas that Matter will really enable in 2025. So I appreciate you putting that up there. Some titles and companies that I haven't done. And I love the Richardson United Energy Solutions. That was a fun time. Hung my own shingle, walked along the renewable side, energy efficiency, and that's actually when I started working with the Alliance.
Well, and I also noted that you went to Georgetown University. I went to BC, Boston College. Two fine Jesuit schools. And,
absolutely.
We could have a podcast about our experiences at two Jesuit colleges, but that could be a different.
Those are good. Those are good times, and that is the Jesuit way of teaching is great, right? And it's about it is a person for others, and actually that I know we're not going to talk about it, but I think that's really important to why I love this role, because it is that passion, putting yourself below the good of others is really that that principle there, and that's something that the Alliance does, and that's so it's something I carry through.
No, there's a lot of parallels there. A lot of parallels there. But let's talk about Matter itself for those people who are not aware of it. My description at the beginning of the podcast was a little probably not as explicit. It's a lot more than, and people know it because of the interoperability piece, and I think that solves a huge problem.
Yeah.
But there's also a security element to it, which not too many people know about it, which I love because we know a lot of IoT devices out there. When you take them out of the box, you really don't have a lot of security care integrated into the product. But from your perspective, let's do a quick minute summary of what Matter is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Matter is at its core an interoperability standard. Nobody knows in the real world what that means. But what they do is expect that everything will just work together. And so you have a lot of companies that have talked about works with this, works with that. And that's what Matter delivers in terms of interoperability for devices. So it allows consumers to basically choose any product they want and any service or experience and have a full expectation that it will work with everything they already have in their home. Or professional environment as well. So Matter is the standard that delivers that. And the other part that's really important is it's a process, and it only works if companies all buy into this, and that takes time. And this is about an evolution of the technology to get to a simplified experience of smart home that Matter enables, and by taking away a lot of the complexity from the consumer and a lot of the worries about things like you said, like security. And so Matter, coming out the door, is arguably the most secure interoperability standard the industry's ever seen, and that's by design because we're learning from the past experiences. And it's a way for consumers to just simply now focus on choosing the devices, not having to become network administrators. And when I get to this point in my explanation, anybody in my friend network that doesn't work in technology says, "Well, hurry up, get more devices," because everybody wants this, but they're impatient, just like we all are.
Right. And you see, what I love about the standard and the promise of the standard is that you don't really have to, when you walk into a store, you don't have to care about whether it works with Amazon, it works with Apple, it works with Google. I mean, the Matter good seal of approval, for lack of a better phrase, takes that worry out of your mind. It is that security element that I mentioned before. And the other thing I think it encourages, just either directly or indirectly, is more and more people are putting disparate devices. They're not just putting a smart lock. They're not just buying a smart lights or whatever device. And very frequently they come from different vendors. It helps with the onboarding piece. And the other day I tried to do it with a few lights in my new home, in my living room. And it took me, and I know what I'm doing, but it took me the better half of a 45 minutes to coordinate, to configure it properly, to make sure it's working with, from a setup standpoint, to make sure that it's worked to suit my needs from a scene standpoint. But there really, it really is a big deal. And again, we'll talk about the piece I want to talk about. Is there anything else you want to add to the Matter piece?
No, I think you hit on one of the key things, right? So the differentiation for smart home is really in the cool products and the services. But you have to have some core pieces work seamlessly. And in closed ecosystems, that's easier to do. It's harder to do in open ecosystems because you don't know who is going to be trying to join into your system. So you have to have security, and you have to have common joining and commissioning processes. And so we're borrowing from what we've already learned with our company, member companies have already learned and brought into the standard. Everybody has to agree on what that common commissioning and joining process looks like, and how devices are going to get into networks, and then finally turn it over to Mark to decide, okay, I want this as part of my, my tree light up or my morning, good morning routine. That process is really difficult to make work properly across open ecosystems, but it is working. It's working even better, and it will work even better in the next year. Standards evolve over time. They become strong. UZigBee, for example, it's on revision 23. All those processes, all the problems, all the fixes, all the issues are relatively solved. Nice and mature, works really well. Matter is 2 years in, and we've learned a ton already through interop testing, through companies bringing products in. And that process now, that joining commissioning, is getting much more seamless. And we probably have a few more things to sort out in the next 12 to 18 months before it is just incredibly perfectly smooth and there's absolutely no issues. And that's part of the process. And we know that. And fortunately, companies are already delivering great experiences today with Matter. But that common joining and commissioning, when we finally have that all sorted and we're practically there, that's when you start to see things just really take off in terms of more than just the TVs at Costco that you talked about.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, and this is I really want to get to. I mean, it's really a who's who of who's in the technology space. That's part of the consortium. Consortium is such a sophisticated word, but it is kind of a consortium. I guess I can use that word.
You can.
As you get into this, here's the question for you, and I'm going to answer it very diplomatically. When you have the kind of personalities that emanate from some of these partners, the Amazons, the Apples, the Googles, I'll pick on those three because they're such heavyweights in the industry. I don't envy your job because they do have big personalities. When you're part of a standard, everybody's supposed to be treated equally. Each of those companies have their own kind of unique vision of what they believe the smart home should be. And the thing that's been my observation with Matter, even though you've got these oversized big personalities as part of the Matter initiative, I don't see a lot of politics. When I speak to a lot of folks, off the record, hey, how's this going? How is that going?
Mm-hmm.
I don't get, hey, Mark, these guys don't know what these guys are mucking things up and they're playing for themselves, which is always the hard thing with standards, of course, because you want to be part of a standard, but you also want to be able to protect your ability to differentiate, and so, I mean, just from a personality engagement standpoint, how do you keep all the cats in the bag?
Yeah. So, there are a lot of analogies, right? So herding cats is one. The one I use is herding tigers, right? I mean, these are cats you can kind of grab and pick up. Tigers are a bit different. You can only catch them by the tail. And we recognize, in order for a standard like this to work, you have to have these large companies. They manage and work with massive ecosystems, and have hundreds of different manufacturers working in their ecosystems. So the first test is, are they still at the table? Do they come to the table? They did years ago, and they're all bought in. And I would say, in fact, some of them are investing even more into the process. So they're bought in fundamentally, and that's the key piece. That didn't happen overnight, and it's I think it is it's a process for them to look at. Am I going to be able to basically own the largest part of this market, and will I be able to hold that? Do I need to keep a closed ecosystem, or is this something that needs to be an open ecosystem and an open industry? And everybody, I think, understands and appreciates at this point that it has to be open. That's in this market. So they buy in fundamentally. But I will tell you, yes, it's definitely active management that doesn't manage itself. But it is, and we have a great staff team that supports them, but we have a great board of directors. You can see the global leadership. There are, literally dozens of companies on the board working together because everybody's vested in creating this industry together. And I think that's the key piece is, everyone has their own view of what their smart home offering is going to be, but fundamentally they all buy into the notion that the smart home market is real. It's going to grow, but it needs a fundamental, infrastructure and foundation, and Matter is that foundation. And so I think everybody's bought into the notion. This is the equivalent of the internet for websites. This is that analogy. So I don't think you're going to see companies say, yeah, I don't think really we want an open ecosystem. We'll go back to closed. That's effectively like saying you're going to go back to a CompuServe model or an AOL. It's just not going to happen, and consumers don't expect that. And the more consumers have choice, the more they're going to expect that everything just works together. We know that that's a heavy lift, but so the politics side, absolutely, there are politics. Companies are driven by multiple factors. We have to have from the alliance side a respect for their economic driver, and helping them find what I call kind of the highest common denominator, not the lowest common denominator. So you look at the notion of whether it's a compliance or an interoperability program. Matter is much more about interoperability, and that's how the standard is defined. It's not simply just saying, yeah, I implemented a spec a certain way, I sure hope it works, right? It is about this all has to work together. And the fundamental tenet and premise of Matter is that Matter products will all interact together as consumers should expect. That joining the commissioning part that you talked about, and being able to engage each other. And so I think it's not an easy job, but it's a great job, because if we do it right, we have the next internet, we have the next IoT, and this is the value for consumers is not just convenience and comfort. It is dollars and cents and security and a lot of other things. So, but we have to build this together, and everybody here gets that, right? I mean, so it's great to see this continued commitment.
Right. And the other thing, and you referenced it before, any good, decent standard that's going to stand the test of time has to it's got to be a living, breathing organism, meaning that it has to evolve over time. Aliro now is coming on board. That's another big deal with support for ultra wideband, and that's a powerful component. There's always been a great product security element, a verified element to that's built into the Zigbee, which Zigbee's been around, and Z-Wave has been around for 100 years. That will probably never go away because that's really a legacy technology. But it really is thrilling to know that, over time, even though the growth has been amazing, even in a pre-Matter world where the market's been growing, at an exponential level, once this firmly gets ensconced, and it's already, making a lot of headway.
Yeah.
When you get to the point where just about anybody can buy a bunch of disparate devices and set them up in less than 30 minutes in a new home, that's a big deal.
Yeah,
that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
It's funny you mentioned, as I think about that, that it will just work. We've talked about, how prominent should the Matter logo be? How much should we be talking about that? And in its early stages, if you think about Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, you really had to go out and talk about what that standard is, so people understood that, okay, I need to go look for standards-based devices, not closed. Well, how do I know which one's open and closed? If it carries a logo, it's open. So same thing we saw with Bluetooth, same thing that we saw with Wi-Fi and Continue. But nowadays, you don't really look for those logos. You just know that it's right. So I know that we will see, the Matter logo, and I think it's a really cool logo, by the way. I think the members did a good job on that. But eventually, it should just kind of go into the background, right? I mean, because we should be focused on buying really cool products and letting the member companies shine through with great services and differentiated products offerings for consumers.
So let's talk about the very wide class of devices supported by Matter that keeps growing over time. We've got a slide that you're going to see in terms of the way that's progressing. I think you guys have taken a very rational approach, trying to focus initially on the categories that have probably the biggest reach. Yeah. Now you're adding other categories. But let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So what you're seeing here is really exactly what you described, right? These are products that folks already know. Also, importantly, these are manufacturers that know how to build connected products, and they know how to build connected products that rely on standards. So not to say that that's an easy lift, but it's a more straightforward lift in terms of getting, lighting controls, locks, and then getting into the sensors, getting into appliances. And I think what you've seen, the members and we're a member-driven organization. So 3 companies want to, standardize on a device type. Great, we've got a process for you. And that's really how these get brought in and developed. So you've seen these companies come in. They know how to engage in standards-based activities. They know how to work on, a common specification. And you're seeing these device types come in, and then you're seeing the functionality within those device types continue to grow as well. And then that third part, of course, is support for both the device type, the functionality, by the ecosystems and by those companies. And it's really that kind of 3-step process that gets us to kind of that nirvana where everything's supported appropriately by any platform that you would choose. So in the early pieces, we had those what I'd call your typical devices that you see in a home that are well-known, broad product manufacturer base. And now you're starting to see some more of those device types, and especially with 1.4, seeing more on the home energy management side, which is great. Also, additional functionality to support enhanced multi-admin support. And then also, as we look at how to enable more devices and more platforms, one of the areas that we've been focused on, the members have been focused on, is this notion of home routers and access points, what we call HRAP. But it is really about now enabling Matter to be supported on those devices. Of course, we're supported in hubs. You can see those in smart speakers and smart screens and smart TVs. But really now then trying to bring in the telcos into the equation. So really, bringing in all those pieces that we rely on as consumers for day-to-day technology. How do I get devices connected easily? I need to have Matter support really across all the relevant points there. Home routers and access points is an obvious one, and great to now kind of see that evolution. So I think that's kind of that evolution piece of Matter.
Now let's talk. This is our final slide here, but it's an important slide, just showing kind of the evolution of Matter. The 1.4 piece just got released just recently in the month of November, and this, of course, there will be a 1.5, and there'll be a 1.6. So I don't expect you to go through this entire slide. Maybe go through the last couple of columns, but maybe hint on what may be coming, as we go forward.
Yeah, you bet. And we have a great panel at CES in Las Vegas in just about a month from now, where we'll have some of the ecosystems and good opportunity to ask them directly as well about their plans for what's coming. But this is the release process. We are looking at, this is a very intense release schedule. And we know that early on, this is really important to get the broad category of devices. So I won't go into each device type, but again, this mirrors kind of, those key devices and then adding in the functionality. So in Matter 1.4, just released last month, you see a lot of the device types that support energy management. So you have things like heat pumps, solar panels, batteries, water heaters, load control switches and controls. And those are things that you would see in a typical home energy equation of how do I manage my energy? What are the big loads? What are the big control mechanisms? What are the things that engage with utilities? So utilities can send you a demand response signal, or can send you a price change. Whatever routine you have can then tell those devices to change their load profile, turn on and off, change and delay cycles on a washing machine or a dryer as well. So those are some of the devices that really got more rich functionality in the 1.4 release. And then what I would also say is that we continue to have maintenance, right? So I mentioned earlier, standards evolve over time, they solidify over time, but they really kind of mature in terms of how effective networks. We're still early on in terms of getting through the teething pains of a new standard. 2 years in, we're probably about where I think industry would expect us to be. We've got great support, great experiences already happening, but we figured out a few things that may be concerns in terms of the joining and commissioning process and sorting through those. So what you're seeing really are a lot of quality things that you would typically see in any software release, where you're seeing examples and learnings from the field. So the fortunate part is we have literally billions of Matter-enabled devices through handheld devices on day one. So without the tens of millions of devices that are out there supporting Matter today, we're getting a lot of feedback. The companies who have that relationship with consumers can see where things are working, where they're not working, and be able to bring that back into the standard itself and put that into the cycle where we figure out where there's either a glitch or an improvement possible in the specification, and then roll that into the next release. Worth noting, each of these releases is supported by actual testing of devices. So this is not a desktop exercise. When you're coming up with a 1.4 release, that means that products have gone through that cycle. When those products actually come into the commercial market, that's always up to the member companies. Sometimes they're public about it, sometimes they're not. Again, back to that earlier point, have to respect their economic driver and their own product management life cycle. So I would expect that we'll see some of these devices either announced at CES or before CES. Actually, I know I've continued to see some cool locks coming out and some other cool devices in that main category. And then I'm really excited about seeing different companies talking about what they're going to do with home energy management on that side. So these releases continue in 2025. We'll have a 1.5 and a 1.6. I would expect that the members will look at one of these as bringing in new device types and features, and another potentially looking at really kind of maintenance releases and things like that. So those are, and I can tell you there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of engineers and product managers from these hundreds of companies working on this. It's an all-in effort still.
Just real quickly before we kind of bring the podcast to a close, how many devices right now are certified, Matter certified?
We've had over a couple thousand. Now, so a lot of companies putting their products through. Not all of those are in products yet, but that's a trailing or a lagging indicator or leading indicator rather of what we're likely to see. So the number of certified devices is pretty impressive this early in the game. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, what I would tell people is like the old saying, you look for the union label. You should look. Now I'm dating myself by making that. But look for the Matter logo because it will make your life a lot easier, Mr. Consumer, when you're buying these products. And I'm sure, Tobin, you're going to have a terrific CES in just a few weeks. So again, thanks for taking the time to join me for today's podcast. For our viewing and listening audience, thanks for making the Smart Tech Podcast part of your day or commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast. Let me bring that up for a second so people can see that. I should have done already, but right here, you'll see them, all these wonderful QR codes. The world is full of QR codes. But please make sure you use these QR codes to connect with me. You can also follow me on X at Mark Vina Tech Guy. And until next time, have a great week. And Tobin, thanks for calling in.
My pleasure. Thank you. Take care.